Hello and welcome to SkySwitch University. This is Corey and I'm going to be walking you through some of the basics that are needed to read call traces, otherwise known as SIP ladder graphs. Before we start to look at the layout of call traces, it's important that you have a basic understanding of how SIP works. Now SIP is the Session Initiation Protocol, and it's a fairly simple messaging protocol that's used to establish, manipulate, and break down sessions. SIP is primarily used for but not limited to voice over IP. It's also important to note that SIP does not refer to the actual audio packets themselves. SIP is used to carry the Session Description Protocol, SDP, which describes information about the audio being sent, typically as RTP, Real-Time Protocol. So let's get started by covering some of the common SIP methods, responses, and then we'll get into some of the basics of the SIP headers and go through what they mean. SIP contains a series of methods, otherwise known as just messages, and responses. That is to say that each SIP method is going to warrant some kind of response. So let's take a look at each of the common SIP methods that you will see in use on our platform. You will only need to remember 5 SIP methods to understand our call flows. There is the SIP invite, which is used to establish a new call or modify an existing call. There's an ACK, which is used as a final response to an invite. There is a refer, which is used to transfer a call either to another extension, an outside number, or a parking lot. And then there is buy and cancel. Buy is used to break down a call that has already been established, while cancel is used to break down a call that is yet to be established. For example, if we're talking and one of us hangs up, this would result in a buy because that session was already established. If I were to call you and hang up while the call was still ringing, this would result in a cancel because the session had not yet been established. Now that we've covered the basic SIP methods, let's discuss the responses.
SIP responses are 3 digits and can be categorized by their first number.
Because of these categories, you do not need to know what every single response means. You can get a general understanding of the response by that category. Some responses are more common than others, so you'll see some of these on a regular basis. So a 100 is a provisional response, which means I got your request and I'm doing something about it. Common provisional responses are a 100 trying or a 180 ringing. A 200 is a success response. A 300 is a redirection response, commonly used for call forwarding. A 400 is a client error. It is important to understand that a client error won't always result in the termination of a call, and some client errors are common, such as a 407 proxy authentication required, which is used to authenticate a call from a registered endpoint. A 500 is a server error, meaning the server did not understand the request, and a 600 is a global error, which means the server did not understand the request, and the server also knows that the request is invalid. Now let's discuss the SIP headers that you will need to know. The to header defines where we are attempting to send the call. The from header defines who the call is from. It is important to note that the to and from headers are not reversed in a response. Therefore, when I send you a message that is from Corey to you, your response would also say from Corey to you. The contact header is defining where the sender of the packet can be contacted. The call ID is a globally unique identifier for that call leg. The C sequence is a number that is used as an identifier to identify which responses belong to which SIP message. An initial SIP message can have any C sequence number. Each response will contain the same C sequence number. A new SIP message, for example a buy, will have a C sequence number that is incremented by 1. The user agent header, while not required, is a SIP header that contains information about the device that is sending the message, typically make, model, and firmware. We will put all that together shortly, but now that we've covered methods, responses, and headers, let's break down the components of a call trace. When you open a call trace, you will see a series of vertical and horizontal lines. Each vertical line represents an endpoint or a server. You will see either an IP address and a port, or a host name at the top of the vertical lines. These are identifiers for where the packet is coming from and where it is being delivered to. The horizontal arrows represent the SIP messages and the direction of the SIP message. Above each horizontal line, you will see a request line URI, which is a brief summary about the packet itself. To the left, we have two sets of numbers. The first set of numbers are in order and are used as reference points when working with another person on a call trace. For example, on this call trace we could say, look at line 22. You can see that extension 4604 hung up and sent a BY to extension 4614. The other number shown is a timestamp given in seconds. The switch logic, like we see on line 2, gives our support team information about what the switch did during this step in the call. When you click on it, you will see detailed information in the frame to the right of the screen. Now if we look at these as point A, point B, and point C, from point A to point B would be considered one call leg. All of the messages from point A to point B would be considered a single call leg and share the same call ID, while from point B to point C would be a separate call leg and would share its own call ID. The messages in this call leg would be referred to as a dialogue, so all of the messages from point A to point B would be a dialogue, while inside of that dialogue, in this particular instance, we have three transactions. Transactions are represented by that C sequence number. If we look at the first transaction, which is the invite to the ACK, our C sequence number is going to be 1. The response and the ACK will both share this C sequence identifier of 1. The new invite is going to be C sequence of 2, along with all of the responses below it. Once we get to the ACK, this individual transaction is over, and the BY is forming a new transaction with a C sequence number of 3. The response to the BY, you guessed it, is also going to contain the C sequence number of 3. So let's read what happened on this call trace. We can see in the initial invite that this is from extension 4604 to extension 4614. Extension 4604, the from user, is on the left hand side, and 4614 is on the right hand side. In the middle we have the switch, which is proxying all of the SIP messages, and in this case also proxying the RTP between the devices. So you can look and see that this was an invite sent from 4604 to 4614. If we look at one leg at a time, we'll just look at point A to point B. There was an invite sent to the switch, and the switch sent back a 407 proxy authentication required with an encryption key. The switch is looking for extension 4604 to authenticate the request by encrypting its own password with the encryption key and sending it back in the new invite. The new invite contains that encrypted password, and now the call is allowed. So the invite from 4604 to 4614 is processed by the switch. We get a provisional response, a 100 trying, and another provisional response, a 100 trying, followed by a 180 ringing. At this point, we would have ringback. Then we have a 200 OK indicating the call was picked up, as 200 OK is a success message, followed by an ACK. Must remember that every invite must end in an ACK. After the ACK, we have a new transaction, which is a BY. This is 4604 hanging up the call and sending information to 4614 that it terminated the call. Then a 200 OK from the switch to confirm that it received the BY message. If you look at the other side of this call, the switch is sending the same information over to 4614. So you can see an invite still showing from 4604 to 4614. So if we look at the response, the 24614 from 4604 has not been reversed, even though this message is technically from extension 4614. So we see a 100 trying, a 180 ringing, a 200 OK where the call is picked up, and an ACK once the call is established, followed by a BYE once the call is terminated, and a 200 OK to let the switch know that we've accepted that termination. This would be considered one of the most basic call flows and is somewhat easy to read. Not a lot happened in this particular call. So let's read through a transferred call. Now we see from extension 4604, which is represented by this vertical line on the left, we can see the from 4604 and the arrow from 4604 towards the switch, that this call was going to extension 4614. So we go through our proxy authentication required and an ACK and our new invite. There's a trying, and that invite is delivered to extension 4614 from the switch, which responds with a 100 trying, and that 100 trying is relayed to extension 4604 as well, followed by a 180 ringing where we would have ringback. When 4614 answers the call, it sends back a 200 OK with all of its SDP information about how we can establish audio on this call. 200 OK is sent back to extension 4604 followed by an ACK. At this point we would have audio on the call. If you look at line 21 and line 22, there's 11 seconds that passes before this invite is sent on line 22. This invite is putting the call on hold using this send only. There are two ways to put a call on hold. A call can be put on hold by changing the send receive to send only. This is the newer method, commonly referred to as the offer answer model. Or we could change our IP to all zeros, 0.0.0.0. This would also let the switch know that we're putting the call on hold. And this is the older method, but either method will still work. So after the invite to put the call on hold, there's a 100 trying while we send that invite back to 4604. You'll notice there's still a send and receive here, and that's because the switch is still sending and receiving audio. There's a trying and a 200 OK once that's accepted, and that 200 OK is sent back to extension 4614, followed by an ACK to accept. Shortly after, there is a refer sent from extension 4614. And if you remember, a refer is used as a transfer of some type. So here we're referring to a PSTN number from 4614. So the switch sends back a 202 accept and hangs up on extension 4614 because this extension is no longer needed. A new invite is sent back, which is simply changing the ports, and we send a invite to this PSTN number. At this point, there's a 200 OK, which is a response to the BYE. And if we look at the responses to the invite, we can kind of follow the horizontal lines that are going down from this vertical line. So there's a 100 trying, and a ringing, and a 200 OK. At this point, the switch needs to send a new invite to establish the audio from this PSTN side to extension 4604. There's a trying, 200 OK, and an ACK is sent to both sides. At this point, there would be audio from extension 4604 to the PSTN side of the call until there's a BYE on line 59 where the PSTN side hung up. There's a 200 OK accepting that BYE, and the BYE is also sent back to 4604, followed by a 200 OK from 4604 letting us know that it received that BYE. So while this is more complex, it's still not too difficult to read. When you have multiple call legs, sometimes it's easier to cover up an individual call leg and read a single leg at a time. You can do this with a sheet of paper to figure out what messages belong to which individual call leg. After practice and doing this for a short time, it'll become easier and easier to read, and reading calls with multiple call legs will be no problem at all.
This should give you enough information to get started on reading call traces. The best course of action to proceed from here is to make calls and do actions on those calls. Take notes of what you're doing on the call and then go back and compare it to the call trace. See how that information correlates. I hope you found this course helpful. Thank you for watching.